All right, we are back. And Becky, I hope this isn't a bad sign. Yesterday, I got completely kicked off and could not get back on. And I've warned the committee that if that happens again today, that Anthony will take over.
You warned us Anthony would take over.
I'm going to take my iPad and go someplace else to try and find someplace with Wi-Fi. But of course, nothing's open now. And I live in Putney and there's nothing here. So anyway, so just pick up where you left off. And I think Senator Polina said you got up to page 14. Is that what he said?
Yes, so that's section 4.
Okay.
So it's page 15 in the as introduced version.
Okay, great.
So Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. So I will continue from section 4 in H449. Yesterday we went through the changes to the Vermont Pension Investment Committee. Now the commission that changed the membership and the duties of that committee. And the next few sections are dealing with current law and statute that there are some references to the commission's responsibilities in the State Employee Retirement System Board language, the teacher's language, and the municipal language that had to be changed to sort of update the cross references with respect to the new requirements of the commission and new responsibilities. So I will just highlight, they're going to be very repetitive, but it just had to be changed several times. So section 4 is starting with the retirement board for the state employees retirement system. There is a new requirement that the actuarial the experience study, the actuarial investigation will be done at least once in every 3-year period rather than a 5-year period. So you'll see this change being made in all 3 statutory sections. So this first section is 3 VSA 471, and that's with respect to the State Employees Retirement Board. So line in the as introduced version, it's line 21 on page 15. Section 5 is also dealing with the state employees retirement system. I mentioned yesterday that the state employees retirement system language had some language in there to the standards of conduct that would be adopted by the treasurer for VPIC. That language is now moved into section 2 of the bill, that VPIC will be adopting their own standards of conduct for their own commission. So section 5 is deleting the references to the treasurer adopting those rule standards of conduct for members of VPIC, and then the treasurer will be only doing this for members of the board of trustees for the state employees retirement system. Are there any questions on that? Nope. Okay. So this is going to kind of be repeating those same concepts 2 more times. So section 6 is making the change from the 5-year to the 3-year period for the actuarial investigation in the teachers retirement system board language. And you'll see that on page 17, line 20. And then section 7 is still in the teachers system. Again, deleting the references to the treasurer adopting standards of conduct for VPIC. So the treasurer would only be doing this, adopting these rules with respect to the board of trustees for the state teachers retirement system. Section 8 of the bill is again in the municipal system, changing that length of that actuarial investigation from a 5-year period to a 3-year period. And then section 9 is again, just actually this section did not have any references to VPIC's standards of conduct, but I did change all of the references to it being a committee to a commission in this section of law. Okay. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is not, well, it's a technical question, but it has nothing to do with anything else, pretty much. But on line 16, what is an obligor?
Line, sorry, I'm not sure we're on the same line. Oh, a manner of any.
It's current law. I'm just
Oh,
curious.
yeah. So somebody who has loaned, I think it's somebody who loans money to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Is it, it's that body to whom you are obligated? Is that what I don't see it. Are you?
Or in any manner an
It's
obligor.
current law. It's current
It's
law.
current law.
Forgive me for asking. I shouldn't have asked the question. I'm sorry.
I don't want us to get sidetracked into something that isn't,
I apologize.
I see it.
it's just fine. Okay. Thank you, Becky.
Okay. Section 10 is setting up the task force, to the pension benefits design and funding task force. And this is specifically for the state employees retirement system and the state teachers retirement system. So subsection 8A creates this task force, and they're looking at reviewing and reporting on the benefits, design, and funding of retirement and retiree health benefits for the state employee system, the teacher system. The membership of the board consists of 3 members from the House, not from the same political party, who are appointed by the Speaker of the House. There's 3 members from the Senate, not all from the same party, who are appointed by the Committee on Committees. The director of the retirement division is on the board from the Office of the State Treasurer. There's the Commissioner of Financial Regulation. Oh, sorry, I saw a question.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Becky, in your long experience in legislative council, when we have wanted an array of political parties represented or perspectives, have we done anything different than, say, not of the same political party?
That is our standard template for referencing not of the same, different political parties.
Okay, I think because this is such a topic of interest, if there's a way to ask others in Ledge Council, like, have we ever worded?
I've never seen anything other than that worded, but that's not a question of the drafting. That's a question of the content. So
A Wednesday conversation.
if anybody has any other remembrance that we do it in any other way, I've never seen it any other way in all my years
I mean,
here.
that I would confirm that is what our template is for committees. That being said, if you're trying to get at something specific, we can of course change the language to be more specific to whatever it is, the policy decision that the committee wants to achieve, but that this is the standard language that
I
we
was
use.
just looking for some kind of historical precedent in Ledge Council in case one exists. It was the drafting kind of question, but I'll leave it alone for now.
But so further,
We're not going to talk about whether they should, there's going to be a conversation about this, I can guarantee you. But this is the drafting, this is the way the drafting is done. There will be conversation about whether this is the right policy or not, but that's not a question for Becky. Okay. You want to go on?
Sure. So I think I got through the commissioners of financial regulation and human
Yep.
resources. There's also 3 members who will be appointed by the president of the Vermont NEA, 2 members appointed by the president of the VSEA, and 1 member of the Vermont Troopers Association who's appointed by the president of that association. The members from the House and the Senate, there's a restriction that they shall not be direct or indirect beneficiaries of either system, the state employees or teachers retirement system. And then the members appointed by the NEA, the VSEA, and the Troopers Association. So I'm in subdivision 2B. They shall not be currently serving as a legislator or the spouse or partner of an individual currently serving as a legislator. And then subdivision C says that if for those members that can appoint a designee, upon designation and approval, those designees shall be the only representative of the designator to participate in the task force proceedings. So essentially you can only appoint 1 person to take your place throughout the period of time that the task force is meeting. Subsection C, this is where the powers and the duties of the task force are set out. So the task force is making recommendations about benefit provisions and appropriate funding sources, along with other recommendations that it deems are appropriate. They have to be consistent with actuarial and governmental accounting standards, as well as demographic and workforce trends and the long-term sustainability of the benefit programs. So there's a list of some of the things that the task force needs to consider. First, it will be setting a pension stabilization target number for both the state employees and the teachers retirement system. And that number will be reducing the actuarial accrued liability based on the actuarial value of assets by a sum that's equivalent to the amount of the increase from fiscal year to fiscal 21 to 22. So this is trying to reduce the amount of that number by the same amount that it increased per the actuarial valuation and review that was reported on June 30th of 2020, and for both the state employee and the teachers system. And then same with the ADEC, it's that number should reduce the actuarial determined employer contribution by an amount that's equal to what the amount increased from fiscal year 21 to 22, as reported for both of those systems. I don't remember what that number is off the top of my head, but I can look it up and send it to you if the committee would like that.
It's okay.
So the task force is also looking at a 5-year review of benefit expenditure levels, as well as employer and employee contribution levels and growth rates on a 3, 5, and 10-year projection of these levels and rates. And then based on benefit and funding benchmarks, it will look at the proposed new benefit structures with the objective of adequate benefits within the established cost containment benchmarks. This would include an evaluation of a shared risk model for employer contributions and cost of living adjustments. It would also look at an estimate of the cost of current and any proposed benefit structures on a budgetary pay-as-you-go and full actuarial accrual basis. The task force will then evaluate the intermediate and long-term economic impacts to the state and local economies and their potential impact on retiree spending. It will evaluate any cross-subsidization between groups within the state employee system and adjust contribution amounts to eliminate any cross-subsidization. The task force will evaluate alternative plan designs such as hybrid or defined contribution plan options or a combination of defined benefit and defined contribution plans. It will examine permanent and temporary revenue streams to fund both systems, and this would include a review of whether all or part of retirement income should be tax exempt. The task force will look at a plan for pre-funding OPEB benefits with an evaluation of using federal funds to the extent that that might be permitted. And then finally, a plan to lower OPEB healthcare costs, including looking at health benefit design innovation, state regulatory methods, and alternative methods of providing pooled healthcare benefits. Subdivision 2 says that the task force is not going to be making recommendations on adjusting the assumed rates of return. Subsection D is stakeholder input. So the task force, before they make any recommendations, is going to solicit input, including through public hearings from affected stakeholders, and that includes those impacted by issues of iniquities. It will also consult with representatives designated by the Supreme Court, group D members of the state employees retirement system, and members of the state employee system who are employees of DOC. Subsection E is assistance. So the task force has administrative, technical, and legal assistance from the Office of the State Treasurer. There's fiscal assistance from the Joint Fiscal Office and committee support services from the Office of Legislative Operations. The task force is appropriated in subdivision 2, $200,000 to contract for advisory services from an independent benefits expert and legal expert if necessary. And those would come from general funds. Subsection F, leave time. So public employee members of the task force shall be granted reasonable leave time by their employers to attend the task force meetings. Subsection G is a reporting requirement. By September 1st of this year, the task force would submit a written report to the governor and the 2 government operations committees with findings and recommendations for legislative action. It would also be submitting a copy of this report to the boards of the state employees retirement system and the teacher system for their consideration so they can comment to the legislature. Subsection H, in terms of meetings, the 6 legislative members appointed to the committee will appoint both a House and Senate member as co-chairs for the committee, and those co-chairs would call the first meeting of the task force by June 15th of this year. A majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum, and then the committee would cease to exist by June 30th of 2022. The legislative members in subsection I would be eligible to receive per diem compensation and reimbursement of expenses, and that comes from the legislative budget. The other members of the task force who are not state employees shall receive reimbursement and compensation, and that comes from money appropriated to the state treasurer. And for both of those, that compensation is limited to not more than 15 meetings. Section 11 is a way for our office to not have to go through all statute right now to make the change from Vermont Pension Investment Committee to commission. So this allows Leg Council during the stat rev process to go through all the cross references in statute to clean up that language and replace committee with commission.
I see that coming in a new technical bill next year.
Yeah. Stay tuned. And then section 12 is the effective date, so it takes effect on passage.
Great. Any questions for Becky about the drafting of it?
Nice work.
Yeah.
Nice work. That was anyway, we're appreciative.
Good. So committee, I went through this and have a number of questions that I think are beyond Becky's. They're more why questions, but just for example, if the report is due on September 21st, why does the task force continue to exist for another 7 months or 9 months? I mean, just stuff like that I think is technical. It isn't substantive around the policies, but it's just, so can
We have Sarah and John here, so those are good time to ask those questions.
Yeah, I was just going to ask committee if that was okay to just ask those kinds of questions. I don't want to necessarily get into why did you choose this policy over this policy, because I think that's something we need to we need to hear testimony on and dig into ourselves. But is it okay for us, and do other people have those kinds of questions that might be pretty technical, but beyond Becky's, she shouldn't have to answer for why something like that was done. Is that okay, committee?
Yeah.
Okay, so Sarah or John, do you have a response to that particular one?
I'm not sure that I have a strong response to it. I guess I would say that we may need members of the task force to continue to participate in conversations when the legislative session starts. Not that they would meet, but that we might want to call them to testify. Representative Gannon, you may have another thought on why that's there.
No, Madam Chair, or Representative Copeland-Hanz, I think you're correct. That's why the language is there. So if there's a need for them to testify before the legislature, they'll have the opportunity to do so. I've seen that language in other summer study bills.
Okay. I'd never seen that before, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Ram, did you have a kind of a technical question?
I think so. I can let Senator Clarkson, it was like a follow-up. I think she had a follow-up to
Yeah,
that.
and I just want to follow up. I think it makes total sense that given that it will be live as an issue all during next session, it makes total sense that the group of people who are who have invested the most in it be there either to meet and resolve things and come back with a further recommendation. I think it makes sense for them to still exist because they may have further work to do.
Yeah, no, I just wondered. I just was curious. Senator Ram?
I would just be curious, with the draft that Treasurer Pierce, or the kind of proposal Treasurer Pierce released as the session started, and then the draft that you all started looking at, I believe in March, what were some really important differences to you that had felt, like that was what you wanted to have counter proposals around?
Are you talking specifically about the pension, the benefits package that was presented? Because we're not going to get into the benefits package.
Right. I guess I'm just curious, like as this committee does its public process, was there anything that you felt was critical about what you put forth in the study, that you sort of didn't see originally in the treasurer's proposal?
So you're asking if there's anything that we put in the duties of the task force that was responsive to some of those issues that were identified between the treasurer's proposal and the House proposal?
I guess what I'm getting at is we heard from some folks that it felt prescriptive. So I'm just wondering if you could respond to that. How do you think there are ways that you do want there to be some prescriptive nature of this discussion? And what's important to you about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it felt important to us as we were having conversations in committee, and also looking at how interim study committees on other topics have either succeeded or failed, it felt important to us to direct the task force on a couple of issues to focus on, and or not focus on in the case of adjusting the rate of return. And so that's why it looks fairly directive, because otherwise it is a vast challenge, and it could be difficult to know where to begin.
And what made you sort of feel like the governance change, the overall governance changes make a really big difference to what happens moving forward?
So I think the transparency and the stress testing is very important to us, and we believe will help make improvements going forward, as well as the creation of spots within the commission that will be occupied by independent financial experts. Because we know that it's important for beneficiaries of the system to have a seat at that table with that investment committee, but we also know that that there are certain skill sets that are resident within people who are financial experts, that you also want to have at that table, so that there can be a dialogue and a full understanding, and also, frankly, a critical eye about advice that may be coming from someone advising the investment committee.
So yes, Senator Collmore.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just looking at the dates again, and I'm sure you guys took a look at what you wanted to lay out in terms of a process. They start on June 15th. They have to have a report done by September 1st. And if I did my math, that leaves them 77 days to come up with a report. And they're limited to 15 meetings. It seems like there's a lot of compression. If they are going to take advantage of the 15 meeting situation, they're going to be meeting quite often during those 77 days, correct? I guess what I'm asking is, would it make more sense to make the report due a little later, or was there a specific reason that September 1st was chosen? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, because this was a source of tension within the committee. There were some voices at the table who were saying, our retirement system is bleeding money every single month. We don't want to delay. On the other hand, any changes that would require legislation wouldn't be able to be made until January anyway. So then the question becomes, well, why not give the task force until December to finish its work? But the other reality is that we would expect that there will be members of the Government Operations Committee, possibly on both sides, who may need to sit on this task force. And we have another very important once in a decade project coming up this fall, which is on the House side a little more intense, because we need to get feedback from the boards of civil authority with respect to redistricting. And so we are already going to have, as a House committee, a fair number of late fall, early winter meetings that we will need to have around the state, hopefully by Zoom, but probably also in person. And so, it became clear that it's going to be a very, very busy November and December.
Am I correct though, Sarah, in remembering that the Census Bureau won't release their data until the end of September? I believe that's true. September 30th, I think.
That was the official announcement. Yes, I think that I heard since then that they think they might be able to beat that timeline.
Okay, all right. Well, as I said, I'm sure you took all this into consideration when you came up with the timelines. I was just curious.
Yeah, happy to answer the question.
And I have a couple kind of technical that I would consider technical on the I guess it's the VPIC, not on the task force, but on the VPIC. If the chair is, first of all, there's a chair that's appointed by the other members. I mean, it's a separate, it's not one of their members, it's a separate person that comes on. And then there's a vice chair that is elected by the members. But if and there's no qualifications, I don't think, for the chair. But if the chair is unable to do their responsibilities, they appoint an interim chair who shall be a financial expert or independent, not the vice chair. And I was just curious about that. It seemed like an odd thing that you have a vice chair, but the vice chair doesn't do anything, because if the chair can't do it, there has to be an interim.
Right. I see the conundrum that you have uncovered, and I would welcome Representative Gannon to share any thoughts that he might have.
I think that's a good comment, Senator White. You're right. I mean, we want to, if the chair can't perform his duties, there's an interim chair appointed until he can, and it has to be an independent and financial expert. And the vice chair isn't required to be a financial expert. I think that could be something that could be fixed.
But so that it isn't the expectation that the vice chair would take over, that there would be an interim chair from outside appointed, just as the original chair was appointed from the outside of the board, right? Is that?
I'm just checking on that.
So the vice chair really doesn't do anything.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I'll give you the page number, but just popping in the language says the members of the commission will appoint the vice chair, but in the instance that the chair can't serve, they can appoint an interim chair.
Sorry, where?
Sorry, I'm finding it out. Just give me one moment.
Yeah. So the chair isn't required to have, I thought.
Okay, it's well, in the as introduced version, it's on page 6. It's under member terms, subdivision 2. So member terms are subsection C.
Yeah.
In section 522.
Yeah, and so may I ask a question? Or are we gonna? Well, there are lots of questions about the chair. You have basically quite long terms. I mean, it's very unusual I see, for a board to go beyond ability to serve up to 10 years. So you have people able to serve for 12, and yet the chair is able to serve for 20 years. I mean, most people say doing a job for 10 years and then they should move on. What gave you the notion that somebody could serve up to 20 years? I mean, they are pretty worn out after 20 years. I mean, usually as leadership is often done and sort of thought about in 10-year chunks.
Right. And I can certainly let Representative Gannon jump in on this, because he's quite familiar with where this came from.
So first of all, under the current VPIC statute, there are no term limits at all.
Right.
People serve as long as they want to, as long as they're reappointed. And so we do have at least 2 members who have served since 2005. So the concept with respect to the chair serving 20 years is, first of all, unlike the other members of VPIC, the chair is elected by the members of VPIC. So, we thought that he could have a longer term than the members themselves.
That's a super longer term.
And I will say that this was a recommendation from both the treasurer and the chair of VPIC.
Thanks.
Senator Rahm?
When you were thinking about the independent commission, did you talk with Chris or others about how this compares to governance bodies around the country? Do they have advisory boards? You know, what are some best practices that you think are really important in the bill? And what did you sort of decide? It's interesting that we can't make that happen right now.
So there are two models, or there's multiple models of how pension boards are set up. But the model that we follow is having separate pension boards that deal with the administrative issues with the pensions, and then have a separate, basically, investment committee. That is a fairly common model that's out there that other states follow. I think what we focused on in committee is the importance of the independence of that committee, a balance of all of the different stakeholders, which is consistent with the research out of Boston College Center for Retirement Research. So we did look at that. But I mean, I think we were just focused primarily in committee on ensuring that there wasn't, that VPIC did not become politicized, and that it was more independent from the treasurer's office. And we heard testimony from both the treasurer and the chair of VPIC that was very important to them. So I think that was the driving force for that change.
Thanks. Because it was interesting to hear Tom mention that they were in the process of moving that direction anyway.
Yes, they are. They have an RFP out for a study that's contemplated in the bill. So they're already moving forward with looking at a new governance structure that would be much more independent from the treasurer's office. And I really do think it's important, because if you look at other states and how they have set assumed rates of return, Vermont's not alone in having set its assumed rate of return higher than probably it should have been. And so what we're trying to do is ensure that VPIC, in setting that assumed rate of return, is looking at the markets and at the independent investment data that's out there to set that return, rather than being concerned about, oh, if we set the return here or down here, it's going to impact the ADAC payment. That is something we're very concerned about, because if you look at the past history of our assumed rate of return, we have missed it on a number of occasions. And you can look at other states and see the same thing. And you have to wonder if politics enters into the decision of how to set the assumed rate of return, because it lowers budgetary pressure because you reduce the amount of the ADAC in a given year. Unfortunately, it hits you in the back end, because in the next year, your unfunded liability goes up if you don't make your assumed rate of return.
So I have just I'm sorry, did that answer your question, Senator Rahm?
Is that my question?
Well,
It was.
yeah, you had asked a question about, okay, so now I have a question, and this is really picky. This is really picky. Under sections, you've always talked about an independent VPIC, but in section 3, where it calls it a standalone entity instead of, is there a difference between an independent entity and a standalone entity?
Sorry, where are you, Jeanette?
Well, I'm on section 3.
I know, but what page?
Well, I think I'm looking at a different page than you are. So just forward to section 3.
Okay,
because I'm looking at the draft before, because I printed that out, and it's on page 13 on my draft.
Page
But
14, Allison, page 14.
Thank
Okay.
you. Got it.
And I just wondered, I know that's really, really picky, but I just wondered if there is a difference here.
I think, what VPIC and the Treasurer's Office are working through right now is a memorandum of understanding that would make VPIC more of a standalone entity with its own employees that aren't in the Treasurer's Office. So Tom Galanka referenced that there were 3 employees that work for VPIC, Eric Henry, who's the Chief Investment Officer, and 2 others. I think they would move into VPIC as a standalone organization. And I think you should talk to Tom Galanka about that. next week. I can't hear you, Madam Chair. Sorry.
Well, of course you can't hear me because I was on mute, and I'm on mute because I've got a lot of noise out here. But so we'll talk about why the two different terms. Okay. Any other questions right now? Yes, Senator Ram?
Talk to other members of the current former VPIC, or do you feel like they really spoke with one voice through Tom?
So Tom presented our governance structure to the VPIC board, and they voted unanimously to accept it with a couple of exceptions. They did not discuss or vote on term limits, and one other, whether a legislator should be on VPIC or not. They did not vote on those two issues, but they voted on the rest of the governance structure. They made some recommendations for modifications that were in a memo that you can find on our page, and we made those changes in this draft of the bill, or I should say this bill.
And those two issues are policy issues,
Right.
the term limits and the
Whether should serve on VPIC or whether there should be term limits or not.
Right. Senator Clarkson, did you start to say something?
No, I just wanted to clarify, did they not vote on those because they disagreed, or they felt that they were going to leave them to us to make those decisions?
I think those, given that a current member of the legislature sits on VPIC, I think that was a controversial issue.
And
I think also with respect to term limits, given the fact that there are a couple of members of VPIC who have been there since 2005 was why they avoided taking a
Right.
stand on term limits.
Yeah, thank you. You had mentioned that.
Yeah.
Term limits are so standard now. but-
Any other questions? They are. I just hope they don't get imposed on the legislature, because that's a really, I think, dangerous. No, I've seen it in Maine, and I've seen how it is just a shell game. But anyway.
No, I'm sure we'll have more once we,
I know we'll have more, but I wanted us to talk not about the policy questions here, but just about if we had technical kind of questions for that.
well, I have a technical question, just given the timing and how we're going to make this all happen, and how, because you don't actually call out 3 employees and you don't actually fund them in this bill. So, I mean, this is really granular, but one that has to be done if we're going to proceed with it, and if it's going to make its way either through the budget or as an independent bill, however. So I take it that is work that we could do to add on and flush it out a little bit further.
I didn't understand your question at all. Call out 3 employees?
Right. This bill implies that there'll be 3 employees that will be part of this.
So
VPIC.
I mean, they're currently, I guess, was your thought that they were already paid for and they were already in the budget and they would just be moving? Got it. Okay.
And there's a report back to the legislature on January 15th, 2022, with respect to their recommendations with respect to their change into a standalone independent commission, which is when we could tackle the issue of how we fund this. But I will say that VPIC and some of the treasurer's office functions have been funded through the retirement plans. I mean, their costs are borne by their retirement plans.
So as they move to an independent office, okay, well, we can chat about that, I guess.
Tom Galaka can provide you with information on that and what other states have done, and Chris Roop can provide that information too. For example, 2 states that have similar models are Massachusetts and Wisconsin.
Anything else this afternoon that we should look at? So I would suggest that if you have on either section, and again, I'm going to try to be very sorry, I've been trying to keep myself unmuted, but then there was a lot of noise here. So I'm going to try to be very careful about keeping the two main themes here divided so that we don't start wandering around in both of them, because I think they're two distinct areas here to deal with. One is governance and one is the task force. So as you go through this, and I know you're going to spend all weekend reading this and trying to figure it out and angsting about it. So as you go through it though, and come up with any questions, like I have a list of questions, I would like to have you send them to me so that we can get them posted, so that when Steve and Jeff and the treasurer and who I've tried to suggest that we have come in. I have too many pieces of paper.
On Tuesday?
On Tuesday,
So we-
is that we look at the governance issue, and we have Tom Golick, the treasurer, Golanka, the treasurer, the people that are going, the three unions, the VLCT, because Beamers is going to be part of the VPEC. The people that are involved, the treasurer's office, that have them come in, but if they can have some sense ahead of time of what some of our policy questions will be that we'll be wrestling with, I think that would be helpful to them so that they can look at those questions. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else or not, but if I were coming in to testify, I would, and I were Jeff Fannin, as opposed to John Gannon, I would like to be able to know what some of the concerns were beforehand. Not, and Senator Clarkson, we're not going to limit it to those, but just give them a sense ahead of time if we can. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody else. So if nobody else wants to send questions to me, that's fine. I'll just post mine.
We'll work on it. You've given us homework. We'll get, and when do you want them to you by?
5:30?
Today?
Fine.
So do we have a study hall now? Do you promise the phone won't ring?
No.
Email?
Um,
I can do 5:30 if they're no interruption.
no, just sometime. And if they don't get, if you don't get them to me, that's fine. You can ask them when we're
Just sometimes doesn't work. You give us do you want them by Sunday night? Do you want them by
No.
Monday at lunch?
We're meeting Tuesday afternoon. I'd like them by Monday afternoon.
Okay. Right.
Does that work?
Governance questions to you by Monday afternoon.
And benefit the task force questions by Tuesday. Okay.
Perfecto.
Anything else? All right. Thank you. Thanks for spending Friday afternoon with us.
Well,
Have a
Oh.
good weekend.
yes, we have less shoveling